Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This is the virtual open house for the City of Kirkwood's Grants Trail Extension project. So I am the city's Planning and Development Services Director. My name is Jonathan Raish. I am joined tonight by our consultant team, and they will introduce themselves a little later here, but we appreciate everyone joining us and want to give you an overview of this project going forward. So Paul, if you're advancing the slide, you can go ahead to the next one. We're excited as a city, we're excited to move this idea and concept forward that's been talked about for over the past several years here at the City of Kirkwood. I'm still seeing the first slide. Am I? Oh, there we go. All right. Thank you, Paul. So, like I said, this is a concept, the extension of Grants Trail that currently ends at the southeast corner of Kirkwood at Leffingwell and Holmes. We're fortunate to have the trailhead within our city boundary, but it's always been identified as an opportunity going forward to extend that further into Kirkwood. So the information you see here on the screen is about over the past 6 years or so, some steps that the city of Kirkwood has taken to further active transportation within the city. It was really kicked off in recent times by our 2015 pedestrian and bicycle master plan, which this Grants Trail concept to extend Grants Trail was referenced during that time. Since that plan was implemented, the concept was also reiterated in our 2035 Envision Kirkwood 2035 comprehensive plan for the city. So it's come up in a couple of different long-range plans that the city has done in the past few years. Outside of those plans, we've also done a citywide ADA transition plan focusing on prioritizing improvements throughout the city to meet ADA accessibility requirements throughout the city. And we've done a number of things on a project by project basis to really implement our pedestrian and bicycle plan, whether it's filling in sidewalk gaps that were recommended in that plan, or implementing shared lane markings, bike lanes, those types of things to increase the pedestrian and bicycle network throughout the city and the community. There you see some examples of a buffered bike lane on West Woodbine on this slide. And then we have other projects that are coming up. The other photo that you see, I'm sorry, is the new raised intersection on Geyer Road. So these are initiatives that the city has taken to further increase safety for pedestrians and bicyclists throughout the community. And this project here that we're discussing tonight is one step further in these initiatives to increase both safety, comfort for pedestrian bicycles throughout Kirkwood as well as the region. So I just wanted to give the context, set the stage for that going into it. And again, we appreciate everyone being here tonight. And I will now turn it over for some housekeeping to Beth Quindry with Shockey Consulting, part of our consulting team for the project.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to go over a couple of Zoom basic things so everyone's ready to participate tonight, and then talk to you about our engagement goals and ways you can provide input to this planning effort. So as far as using Zoom, a couple things that I'll highlight are how you view the meeting tonight, how we recommend you view the meeting, and then how you use Q&A. So we're going to be having a presentation throughout our time together. So having the default setting that I have right now has you just seeing your speaker and seeing the slides. If you want to change that, there's really not a lot of reason to, but if you wanted to change it, there's a view icon at the upper right of your screen. Most screens, that's where it's going to be in your upper right. You can click on that. That gives you what's called a gallery view, and then you'll see all of the panelists. But it's most interesting, of course, to see the person who's speaking. So that's what we recommend. And then we are encouraging you to use Q&A tonight. So if you have questions, if you have comments, including any technical questions that you have for us, troubleshooting that with you, just use that Q&A. And what happens is you get a pop-up window like you see on your screen, and you can type in a question and then hit send. and we will follow up. So the questions that you have about the project, we're going to hold until the end of the presentation, but we'd like you to submit them throughout. So don't hesitate to do that. Some real quick ones we might answer along the way, but most of them we'll hold until after the presentation. Some we may not get to in the meeting, and we will document those and share them with you afterwards. So next slide. A little bit about our engagement and what we are trying to do. Community engagement has been important for this project and will continue to be. We have several engagement goals. We want to help the community imagine this extension of Grants Trail into Kirkwood. You know, it doesn't exist right now. What should it look like? What kind of features should it have? Where should it go? Where should the access be? So we want to help people visualize what it could be like and get people's input on that. We want to communicate the connection of this project to existing plans. The city of Kirkwood has plans for walking and biking that we want to connect to, as well as the city's comprehensive plan that also spoke to walking and biking. And then from a regional perspective, we want to connect back to the Great Rivers Greenway, River Ring plan, and also to St. Louis County's action plan for walking and biking. So this project will mean a lot more if we consider the extensions to, or the connections to those existing plans and build on them. We want to identify the concerns and opportunities the community has, asking questions about concerns for safety and for access to this trail, what kind of features it has, and so on. And then we want to work on building community consensus for a preferred alternative. So as you might know, we don't have an alternative selected now. We don't even have a narrowed down list of options. This is a very early stage of the project where we're trying to figure out what those options should be. So next slide. So there are several ways that you are able to provide input to the project. So the Zoom meeting tonight is one way with the Q&A. We have a mapping tool, and that you'll receive a link to that after the meeting. We also have a community survey. Both of those are going to be available until the 19th. You'll be getting a post-meeting survey. It's going to focus on vision and goals. It's real short. And then, as we talked about, the Q&A that you'll have access to during the meeting. And then we've also provided Jonathan's contact information. So all of that will be provided to you in an email that you receive after the meeting, so you can follow up on it. And a quick note I would offer, we may have some folks who are property owners in the project area, and an opportunity that's been available to them is to have individual property owner meetings with us. And so you might have received a letter in the mail if you're in or close to the project area. So tonight, for your questions, we won't be as well suited to answer your property specific questions tonight, but those property owner meetings are available for that purpose. So look forward to hearing what you think about this project in a variety of ways. Next slide, Paul. So Paul Wojciechowski is going to be speaking to you next with Horner Schifrin.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me, Beth? Okay, great. So I'm Paul Wojciechowski. I'm with Horner and Schifrin. I'm the project manager for the project. And with me today, that will help me answer questions, help answer your questions, is Steve Rhodes from Vireo. And then you just heard from Beth Quindry from Shockey Consulting. She's our public engagement specialist for the project. Getting right to it. So there's some project background I want to go over with you today. It is early in the process, but this is just a little background on where we've come this year on the project. So back in January of 2021, the city started looking at opportunities for a grant application for this Grants Trail extension. And shortly after those discussions, it became apparent that a feasibility study and a public process was really needed to really get a good application established. And then after that was the need for a study was established. Then the city solicited for a consultant to perform this work, and that was in March of 2021. And that's when yours truly came on board. and Horner and Schiffer in our team of Shockey and Vireo. We commenced the project in July of this past July, and over the past few months, we've been defining existing conditions, collecting data, and developing an engagement plan and performing engagement activities just to get the word out and get information out. And that's occurred in August and September. So some project details. We do have a process, and this is the process. We've got a community engagement process we're working through, and it's at every step of the planning study. Data collection is what we've been doing so far, and really initiating things. So we kicked off the project. We established a influencer committee that would guide the plan and help us move through the plan. And all this is collecting data. So we really only hit that first box and the engagement part of things. We've got a little bit to go, and we're going to move through those last those 4 circles there, which is alignment development, alternative analysis, and then finalizing a recommended solution. So we're going to be moving through that pretty quick. So the next time you're going to see us, I'm going to show a schedule at the end of the presentation, and it'll kind of give you an idea on when you're going to expect the next public forum or public meeting to talk about the alternatives and the evaluation of those alternatives. So the project area, this is an area of influence. So it's a pretty big area. It goes all the way up just a little north of Argonne, and you'll see this on the map tool when you open the map tool. And I encourage you to, leave your comments on that map tool. It's really easy to use, but this is the area that's shown on there. So as you can see, it's a little wider down there by the Kirkwood Trailhead, and then it funnels into downtown Kirkwood and farmers market, the train station. So there's a lot of choices we have through this study area. And we showed it big enough to show all the possible areas and allow people to comment on that. So there's several challenges in this project. So crossing 2 railroads, the Burlington Northern Railroad is on the southern end of the project. So right at the Kirkwood Trailhead, that's Burlington Northern Railroad. The railroad that's up by the train station and by the farmers market is the Union Pacific Railroad. Those are 2 challenging aspects. Constrained public right-of-way is another challenging aspect. But constrained right-of-way is really not going to deter our ideas. So to the right there is just a picture of a project I worked on in Rogers, Arkansas. That is you can see a constrained area right next to a railroad track. So we're not going to let that stop us, but that is a challenge. Creating a plan that's of high quality in a constrained space to provide really good connectivity, safety, a safe environment for all users, and then really support economic enhancement in the city of Kirkwood. Funding the improvements is also a challenge, and it's an opportunity. So, we're going to incorporate the application considerations in the plan. So we're looking at that application when we're analyzing things and collecting information to make sure that when we do go to the funding stage, that we've got our I's dotted and the T's crossed to be able to really provide a really good application. And thinking about that now is really sets us up really well, but it is a challenge. Topography and grades in some cases, while the railroad alignment is pretty flat, the grades on the streets that are all around and through the study area gets to be challenging at times. And that's one big thing I've heard from a lot of property owners that I've talked to over the past 2 weeks. So opportunities. one of the biggest opportunities is to connect one of the most highly used trails in the region to downtown Kirkwood. Grants Trail, Gravois Greenway, it's being referred to now in the Greenway network. There's a lot of people that love to use that trail. So dropping that into downtown Kirkwood is really a good connection. The ability to integrate regional plans like the River Ring and the bike plan, the bike and walk plan in Kirkwood, and the action plan for biking and walking, with these local planning efforts to bring this trail to downtown Kirkwood, we got a really good opportunity to link a lot of things together, especially in the Greenway network. We have an opportunity to enhance the community with a really great trail connection and what comes with that. So when a trail comes, in a lot of cases, there comes a lot of great ideation and ideas from property owners on how to connect to that asset in the community. So different people do it different ways. You can see different ways people connect on the rest of the Grants Trail, but the key is when it's there, it's really a good asset, and it's open to enhance the community by those connections. And then another opportunity is funding the plan. While about a year ago, or 2 years ago, there was really a couple funding sources that you can go with to fund a plan like this. Well, nowadays there's numerous other options that we can use to fund the plan, so that's a great opportunity, as well as the new infrastructure bill. There's a lot of great possibilities that we would like to expect that are going to be opened up by really getting this plan in place and alignment in place. We're going to be ready to take advantage of all these opportunities. So in our engagement plan, we identified several stakeholders. The general public, which means property owners, business owners, residents near the proposed trail, really residents of all Kirkwood. This is a connection for everybody. And then trail users. So that's the general public. And really everything we're doing is really focused on, the most important part of this, which is the public. We have several decision makers, so elected officials and appointed officials, city staff, and then of course the railroad are all going to be involved in actually decision making and how we move through this. And then we have influencers, an influencer group. It's a focus group really of individuals that have a stake in the planning of this connection. Elected officials, staff, Kirkwood Downtown Special Business District, Great Rivers Greenway. They work with the city on the trailhead, the Kirkwood trailhead, and then the bridge over I-44. TrailNet owns a section of the Grants Trail. Kirkwood Parks, we're envisioning is probably going to work to maintain this section of the trail. And then St. Louis County Parks is operator of a lot of the trail to the southeast, and we want to make sure there's consistency in operations and maintenance. So the project vision. So that influencer group, we sat down with them last month, and we talked a lot about what the vision of this trail would be and what some of the goals would be. So I'm going to go over that with you now. So the project vision for this effort is that the Gravois Greenway Grants Trail extension into historic downtown Kirkwood provides bike and pedestrian connections to community destinations, neighborhoods, schools, and businesses for all people of all ages and abilities to increase recreational activity, encourage economic development opportunities, and enhance the vibrancy of downtown. That's a big statement, but it encapsulates what we've heard from our influencer group and from a lot of stakeholders and property owners that we've talked to so far. And we're going to want to hear from you at the end of the virtual open house survey, we want to hear what you think of this vision. So we want to hear your comments on it. Does that hit the mark for you? Does it not hit the mark for you? What comments you have on that is really important to us to make sure that this vision is pretty accurate, and it's really going to guide decision making through the rest of the planning process. Likewise, the project goals are key to a planning process because you have to establish goals on what you want this trail connection to achieve. And again, these were developed with the influencer group, as well as it's validated quite a bit from a lot of discussions I've been having over the last 2 weeks with property owners in the corridor. And we also want you to comment on these and let us know if we hit the mark on this. So goal number 1 is to provide connectivity to key destinations around and in the vicinity of downtown Kirkwood. Downtown Kirkwood's a big area, so we'd like to hear from you on what are key destinations that you would like to connect, and you can use the map for that. Goal 2 is the trail extension and future connections to the trail are safe and comfortable for all users of all ages and abilities. So 8 years old to 80 years old and everything in between. Goal 3 is increasing viable walking and bicycle opportunities for recreation and transportation. Goal number 4 is provide facilities that encourage trail usage by users from around the region. Goal number 5 is the trail infrastructure will be low maintenance and can use available city resources. We don't want this to be taxing. We want it to be well maintained and consistent with rest of the operations in the city of Kirkwood. So it's really important to have that operations and maintenance piece of this. Think about it now so that when it's built and being maintained, it's of high quality and sustainable. Goal number 6 is accommodate future connections to other regional trails and destinations. While there's nothing really active now, we have to look ahead to how we can connect this to other greenways in the River Ring network, the bikeway network in Kirkwood, how those connect into this trail extension, as well as the action plans connections. And then goal number 7 is encourage trail-oriented development, which we want economic development as a result of this, and orienting things to a trail. It's really a good thing and a healthy thing. So I'm going to go through some of the work that we've done so far, and then I'm going to move into and show you where we're going in the near future. The first we call is discovery, or its existing conditions development. So it includes collecting data. We've flown a drone in the area to collect information. So instead of ground surveys, we're able to fly a drone and collect that detailed data on topography and establish the information we're going to use in our design process. We've been assessing existing conditions for alignment development to see where crashes are occurring, and I'm going to go through some of that just in the following slides. We've developed a vision and goals that we want you to comment on. And then we're developing evaluation criteria, and we have a start on that, but information that people put into that web tool in the survey is going to go into that evaluation criteria. So we really have the best alternatives right to the top. So existing conditions, average daily traffic is important at intersections. So when we develop a trail alignment, we want to make sure that it's not just the segments that are really nice to ride on. We want to make sure that when people cross intersections, it's safe and secure for that all of ages and abilities approach. And looking at the traffic, this is just a map that shows in purple is roadways that have under 3,000 cars a day. Roadways that have above 3,000 cars a day are in green. So we just use that cutoff to know what streets are carrying some traffic that we need to make sure we watch the crossings on. Speed limits, Kirkwood's really done a great job in establishing a baseline speed limit of 20 miles an hour. And those are shown here. Streets that have speed limits of 25 miles an hour are shown in yellow. And those are signed unless they've changed the signs recently. This is pretty accurate. And then we've got one street that's 30 miles an hour, and that's Leffingwell. That's also important for crossing those streets and what kind of tools you use to cross streets as far as signing, markings, or active signals. Destinations. We've highlighted some key destinations here that are along the corridor. So not just the trailhead, but we want to make sure that we're addressing and pointing to connections to key destinations in the corridor, along the corridor. So topography, it's important. Of course, a rail line is built on a pretty minimal grade for the trains, but there's other parts that we are going to have to be concerned with. So topography is important, and one of the goals that we've established is make sure the grades are appropriate for all ages and abilities. Again, so we're going to look at the grades of the path or the alternative that we come up with. Property ownership. The yellow areas on this map are railroad owned properties. Some are active, some are not so active. The city properties are in the blue. So one of the key things is to use as much public right-of-way as possible. The railroad right-of-ways are definitely a challenge. I'm not going to shy away from that. But so we need to know where they are and how wide they are, because they're actually wider than most people think. And I've talked about that quite a bit with some property owners over the last couple of weeks. So we are going to try to use as much public right-of-way as possible to make it really cost-effective and minimize impacts. We looked at crashes, much like your initiative on Vision Zero. Crashes are really important. So knowing where those crashes are, and this is just a map that shows specifically in the study area that are bicycle and pedestrian involved crashes between the years 2011 and 2021, so the last 10 years. And we have got a couple spots, Elliott and Leffingwell. Those red dots are the personal injury crashes that involved personal injury. So we've got 3 of those. So we're going to be cognizant at those locations, especially to make sure that we address any kind of root causes of any issues at those locations. So what comes after this data collection period is ideation and evaluation. So coming up with alternative choices, screen alignments, because we're going to have a lot of choices here, to a reasonable set of alternatives and alignments, and then refine those for the final conceptual plan. So railroad and property owner coordination. This is really important in just the ideation and development of alignment alternatives. So by engaging adjacent property owners and owners in the area, as well as the railroad, it really gives us things to think about when we develop all alignments, so that we're not just throwing alignment out there at will. We have to identify the right contacts at the railroad agencies, as well as the property owners. We have to detail what we ask at the right time. We have to gain agreement on what property owners and the railroad are willing to work together on along the right-of-way. And then we want to, what type of design details are needed to create a win-win situation. All that kind of brings us to alignment development. And when we're thinking of alignment development on this project, since it could be a little cumbersome and a kind of a big thing item to chew, we're breaking this off into 4 segments in general. The first segment is the east segment. So getting from the trailhead, the Kirkwood trailhead, over to around Leffingwell, this eastern piece. There's most likely going to be about 4 choices, 3 to 4 choices on how we get from across this section of the corridor. The middle segment runs from about Leffingwell to Fillmore. So again, there's going to be likely 3 to 4 choices in this area. The connection to downtown, again, there's several choices here, and we will document those. And then we have the Argonne segment to get over to the existing train station. So when I say different choices in each segment, we don't want a roadblock to come up that kind of stalls the whole alignment. So we will be piecing together these options that we have in each of these segments and put together the best option, or it could be an interim option that builds to an ultimate option at some point in the future. If something's going to take a little bit more time, we want to make sure that we accommodate that ultimate preferred choice. So when we evaluate alignments, we're going to look at qualitative measures. We're going to look at quantitative criteria. We're going to address community concerns that you tell us about on the map tool and by the surveys. We're going to assess the opportunities of each of these alignments that we look at. And we want to allow for the best option to rise to the top, but doesn't compromise the vision. So for example, if one segment has a low cost option and cost maybe one evaluation criteria, we don't want really cost to drive the whole story in the choice of that option. That is one element of a choice in an area. So we want really the best options to rise to the top and really hold on to that ultimate vision of what we want this trail connection to achieve. Develop the so after we screen it, we get down to a preferred alternative. We want to kind of work that alternative and develop a final concept and refine that some with discussions with property owners, the railroad, and others to really get at a final conceptual plan that we look to move forward. We want to identify the phasing, if there's phases involved in the preferred option, and then prepare the estimate, a detailed cost estimate for the preferred plan. In the evaluation phase of this, we're probably going to look at high level. We will look at high level costs, planning level costs, to gauge about how expensive a certain alignment would be. And then finally, when we have a detailed option that we want to move forward with, the city wants to move forward with, we'll develop a funding application and then identify additional funding options that may be available to achieve the ultimate vision, which is a completed connection of the Grants Trail to downtown Kirkwood. So our schedule, the funding applications is pretty much the deadline we're shooting for, which is in February. So we're in the early part of October now, which is this virtual open house. We have alignment refinement. We're going to start working on that. So we've finished our data collection, and we're going to do preliminary planning and then alignment development over the next couple months. And then probably in the mid-November, we'll come back to you with the analysis, the options we have, the alignments we have, this first screening, and then where we're looking to go to get your opinion on what the result of this analysis is. By the middle to end of December, we'll be ready to start, really working on the grant application. So we have a lot of overlap here. So if you notice, there is overlap. So we will start really getting the data together for the funding application, probably in early December, to make sure we have all the information needed for that application. And that'll continue on through the end of January. And then we will, again, make sure that you know exactly what the grant application is going to include. And if there's property owners adjacent to the alignments, you're going to be the first to know, and we'll be talking continuously to you through this process. So now Jonathan will lead. So we have a few questions here. So he will facilitate a discussion on this.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate that. Yeah, so again, Beth kind of went through housekeeping, and we did have a handful of questions or so that have come in throughout, and we appreciate that. We did want to make sure, so if you have a question at this time, you can click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and put it there. We're going to get to as many as we can tonight. We did want to make sure, wanted to hold them to the end and make sure everybody could focus on the presentation that was being made, so there wasn't too much distraction going on. And again, whatever we can't get to tonight, we will publish later with answers and follow up with that information via email to everybody who's attended. So I will go ahead and start going through some of these that we've received. So the first one that came in asked, when you say extending the trail, is this just adding a bike lane? If an actual separated paved trail, how will you do so through a residential area? So yeah, that's a great question, and one we have definitely heard. And so at this, as Paul made clear at this point in the process, so goal number 2 that was shown there, that is being proposed and we want feedback on, right? I will also refer people right now to, there's a community survey available on our website, and we're collecting that input still. Paul said that his team is going to start doing the actual alignments to get the choices together to come back to the public here later in November. But still, for the next week till October 19th, between now and then, we still have an open community survey, and we still have the interactive mapping tool that people can comment on, so that we can incorporate those comments to come up with the alternative routes. So back to the question. The goal, one of the overarching goals that has surfaced with this project, is to provide a comfortable and safe connection. So ideally, in the realm of hierarchy of trails, yes, a separated multi-use path is kind of the gold standard, right? So that, I think, is what the project will aspire to whenever possible. But as Paul went through some of those challenges, and I think this is probably why the question is asked, is it wouldn't just be adding a bike lane. You know, we're talking about pedestrian and bicycle facilities. So now there may be, because of constraints in the project, there may be a time when it's a combination of a sidewalk and then a safer facility. It could be a bike lane. There's all sorts of treatments. Could be a protected bike lane. It could be a number of things. So those are all the details that will come out later. But as far as going through a residential area, if it needs to, so as Paul also mentioned, one of the biggest opportunities we have is working through the existing city right-of-way. Most street right-of-ways are 60 feet wide in Kirkwood. And if you think about it, the streets may be as narrow as 26 feet wide, you know, so there's always more public right-of-way than pavement. In some cases, that might give us enough to expand a sidewalk from 4 feet to 8 feet or 12 feet and make it into a multi-use trail. But it just, those are all the details that we're starting that process now. First, we want to have the input about where people will be most comfortable, what their ideas are, and then we'll come back with the details. But anytime where the city would have to, where it's not able to provide the facility within existing right of way, that's why the communication and participation with property owners in the study area is so important, and with the railroad as well is so important, is because we need to start having those conversations now, so that if the time comes when we need to start discussing about easements or right of way purchasing through that process, and it's a very particular process, especially when federal funds are involved, then we would go through that. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. That vision is a trail connection, because that's what people would expect from a Grants Trail extension. But we know full well that we may have to look at other tools in our box of choices for biking and walking. It could be a calm street approach for a segment of this. Most likely, it's not going to be just a simple bike lane, because it's not really all ages and abilities. But we do have a lot of tools, more tools in our toolbox than we ever had. But the vision is a trail connection. And when you do go through a residential area or even an industrial area, it may end up being, because the shared use path is really on its own right away. It could be a side path, which is a shared use facility that's along a roadway. So that is another choice we have in this case, is a side path, which is a wide sidewalk, wide enough for people rolling, biking, or walking or running along a roadway that has separation between the curb line and the facility. So just a little addition.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, the next question we received was, are there any environmental / pollution justifications for Kirkwood still having light industrial zoning in this area? And the follow-up, do we have any knowledge of contamination that would have to be remediated before it would be suitable for conversion to residential zoning? So I guess to clarify that this extension, this trail extension project and study is not looking at rezoning any of the property. We're not discussing that. The actual, much of the area is zoned light industrial and has been for years. I think back in the 60s, there's actually a couple blocks that are still residential homes that are light industrial. They were rezoned back then in the 60s. So that has been consistent with the vision to have a light industrial area in the city. And I won't go too deep into it, but there's all sorts of reasons from a community-wide perspective on land use, on why it's a good idea to have some options for every type of use, to have a diverse base of business and residential as well. So the city's long-term vision has not been to change this from light industrial, but we know that this project will have to work to make sure that the trail or the connection is safe and comfortable as it goes through those different land uses. And I'm not aware of any large area-wide study that's been done as far as contamination and any remediation that would need to be done. But you know, we would, for purposes as a trail, we would do that through the federal process as needed. So. So again, no rezoning, not looking to convert anything to residential zoning in this area, but to make the trail as comfortable and safe going through the current developments. So,
just a little addition, Jonathan, we are going to do an environmental screening to look for issues with contamination or hot spots that we may note. So we're going to be doing an environmental screening to make sure that we know where any sensitive areas are, so we can either avoid them or know that they're there, so we can include some type of mitigation in our plan, because the last thing we were going to want to do is when we get to the funding application or to start designing something we've garnered funding for, is to have something come up that we weren't expecting. So we're trying to uncover all the rocks and issues that we can find moving forward through this planning process. And it is moving, it's going to move fairly fast, but we've already got that screening done. And we know where any issues are that we need to watch out for. We've already established those.
Great. Thanks, Paul. All right, the next question was maybe more of a suggestion. So it says, can you connect the two Elliots? So there's a stretch of Elliott that runs off of Holmes and a stretch of Elliott that runs off of Leffingwell, and the two are disconnected by one of the old railroad spurs. So there's not current, the railroad spur and private property both currently prevent those two from connecting, but that's, we are certainly looking at options through there as a potential alignment. So yes, appreciate the suggestion. It would take working with railroad and private property owners to go through there. So it is under consideration. Let's see. Next question was, are you able to put a constrained path along an existing active railroad? So I think, Paul, you might be able to speak to your experience on this. And I think what I'll say from my experience is that it depends on the railroad and what they're willing to accept, but it also depends, things change quite a bit if you're just outside of what Paul mentioned, the railroad right of way. So a lot of the railroad right of ways Paul mentioned are much wider than most people think. And so obviously the railroad has ultimate control, what happens within those right of ways. And so it depends on the railroad and what they're willing to discuss with the community in a project like this. And they do even have some control or sway on things just outside of their right of way. So it's certainly important to have those discussions, and we've started those and we'll continue to have those. Paul, I don't know if you have anything to add with your experience.
Well, yeah, a constrained path along the railroad, yes, it's definitely possible, but it depends on the property owner adjacent. If there's an area of public right of way that's along the railroad, we're certainly entitled to use that public right of way that's along it. And most people, Scott is a public street and it's adjacent to a railroad that does have a little bit of width there. So yeah, we would be able to do that, but we will work with the railroad to make sure that it's done in a manner, because at some point we will cross the railroad with any connection, whether it's at one of the at-grade intersections or with an improved at-grade intersection. And a lot of people know what I mean by that too, which Leffingwell, that crossing of the rail of the UP line is, it can use some work. So we will need to work with the railroad at each step. So adjacent to the railroad corridor, yes, but most of those have private property ownership. So we would have to work with a willing property owner to work through that to see what works for them. Like I showed on the example on Rogers, that was an industrial site to the right and the rail corridor to the left, and the trail was fenced off right between them. Now that wasn't a long stretch, it was a short stretch, but that could have been a very difficult stretch. And if there was an agreement between the adjacent property owner and the railroad to do what was shown there for that short stretch. So we will certainly look to that.
All right, next question is along the similar theme here. So can the city claim eminent domain for the abandoned railway spur? So there's a couple layers to that. Actually, one of the first hurdles when dealing with railroad is to actually figure out if the spur is abandoned or not. And while it may seem by looking at it that it is, it may not technically be abandoned by the railroad. In our initial discussions up to this point, there's actually quite a bit of what most people would look at as abandoned that the railroad has not made that official determination on yet. So there's kind of two different pieces. Is first, what is abandoned? If it's not, that's another process that Paul mentioned. It could mean having an interim choice or something like that, if there's an ultimate goal to go that route. Now, the eminent domain piece, I will fully admit, I can't say that I 100% know. My guess is that we would not be able to, because the way that the railroads have been set up over this century or so, and in the federal rail administration and the powers that they have. I don't believe we would have eminent domain over that, but I will have to, I guess if it comes to that, we'll have to do that legal research. So, Paul, do you have any experience in that specific case?
We're gonna have to work through that. Yes.
Yeah. All right. That's fine. So, all right. Next question was, will lighting be in the plan? So lighting has definitely come up in conversations, input from different groups, and in being a key part to both safety and comfort for the users, as well as adjacent property owners. So yes, this is a consideration that will be made to make sure that it is lit safely.
And that question is asked in the survey that we have out. So that's going to be your chance to let us know what you think about lighting in this plan.
Great. All right. Next one, what consideration will connectivity to I-44 bicycle bridge be as a future consideration? So let's see, that is also, I'm trying to pull up the goal or look at the goals here. Yeah, so goal number 6. So not too many goals, but it showed up as one of them, one of the 7. Goal number 6 is to accommodate future connection to other regional trails and destinations. So that is definitely something that's come up. Paul mentioned some of the regional partners that we've had meetings with Great Rivers Greenway and TrailNet, St. Louis County Park. So that actually is a specific topic did come up, both connecting to the west with the I-44 and the Merrimack Greenway, and even east through Webster Groves through the Greenway that goes there. So it's not going to be specifically part of this scope of the design or construction with this project, but it is a big goal to make sure that we're leaving that opportunity open for the future. All right, next one. Would just finishing Leffingwell to East Elliott allow bikers to avoid most of Holmes? Wouldn't that be a good first phase? We're just finishing. I'm guessing that the question is going along Leffingwell as a route alternative, and in the East Elliott area, rather than having people go on Holmes, that being even an interim solution. So right, that is one of the alignments that we're absolutely looking at. It does have a railroad underpass currently, although it's a very old old viaduct or old overpass for the rail. So there are challenges. None of these paths or choices are going to be easy. That's for certain. But yeah, I think some sort of, Paul mentioned each kind of segment having multiple solutions, and having an interim solution of something that is easier to achieve, but with an ultimate goal is certainly possible. Paul, anything on that?
Well, yeah, and the existing Bike St. Louis in Kirkwood, that's kind of an interesting name, but Bike St. Louis in Kirkwood actually signs you down Holmes to get to the Grants Trail. So I know this comments related to that. Would this be another way to do it? Yes, it would. There's a couple ways, and usually people find their most favorite way if you make it really nice to use. So that's definitely a possibility.
All right. Let's see. The next comment. I'll read it. I don't know that it's a question. Well, so my concern is parking. I assume especially on the weekends, there will be a lot of town folks wanting to park in downtown Kirkwood. Is parking a consideration as weekend are already pretty busy? Yes, and so parking certainly was discussed in the vision and goals, in making sure that we either coordinate with existing parking resources or incorporate and include additional parking wherever possible, at both ends. Essentially, obviously there's already a small parking lot at the current trailhead, but yes, that availability or ability for people to park and ride is definitely something that's part of the considerations.
And one of the key ideas on this also is with a good connection is for somebody to park down the line on the Grants Trail and ride into Kirkwood as opposed to driving into Kirkwood, and make that really easy to do. But in order to achieve that goal, we were going to have to think about good bike parking infrastructure in downtown and increasing, because if this works the way we really want it to work, there's going to be a lot of bikes, and you don't want bikes just laying and chained to trees and things like that. That's not a good thing. So we do have to think about places for people to park their bikes once they get into downtown. And that's going to be part of our considerations to make it really appealing and easy to ride your bike and park and walk in downtown, as opposed to trying to drive here. So hopefully it will decrease the stress on parking. And I've been around Kirkwood my whole professional career, starting at MoDOT, and it's always been a challenge. And that's just the sign of a successful city, is parking challenges. So we can hopefully address that and help that situation.
And I will say too, it's also been part of the conversations with this project and more broadly is adequate or good wayfinding with it. So, there are actually, we had a recent parking study for downtown done in the past few years. And there are publicly accessible parking structures, 2 of them with Station Plaza development, that were underutilized, and they're a little bit out of the way. And not everyone thinks of them as being as close as they are physically. So, I think there's some other options that we can do when the trail is coming from that direction in wayfinding and signage to make sure everybody knows about all the available opportunities for parking along the way. So. Next question was, are you planning on a bathroom along the way? I frequently use the Greenway, and there are a couple on the Greenway currently. Yeah, I have heard that. So the current Kirkwood Trailhead has one of the restrooms, and I've heard that people really enjoy having that amenity and appreciate having that amenity. So, there would be no plans to remove the current one, but I think the amenity discussion overall, benches, lighting, trees, those types of things, bathrooms as well, are discussed. The connection, I will say the connection, as the crow flies, is just about a mile from the current Kirkwood Trailhead to downtown Kirkwood. And there are, during business hours, there are public restrooms typically at the farmers market and things like that. So, but it is something that we'll look at on the amenity piece as well. Next one, isn't there a Missouri law that allows the state to take over unused railroad tracks for trails? Looks like that Spur would qualify. So there are a lot of rails to trails projects that have happened across the country. There is a way to do it, but it does require coordination and really permission from the railroad that owns that property. And we certainly have started those conversations, and we'll continue to have those if that's the path that ultimately is the preferred path through this project. Has the city of Kirkwood financially secured the railroad, the Spur line? A lot of focus on the rail, which is good. It's good input feedback to get. So No. So this beginning of this process, again, there's no alignment. We haven't identified the railroad spur as the one that we're absolutely pursuing. That's what we'll be working on over the next few months. But there's no financial, there's no monies currently secured for anything, whether it's property acquisition or construction. That's the intent we rolled into this project, the application for federal funding, as well as the identification of additional funding resources at the end of the project. So once we have a concept plan identified with a preferred route, that is when we will start looking at funding that specific project. But we need to get to the identified preferred path first, so we can develop cost estimates and start talking about what property discussions need to happen as well. All right. Are you going to incorporate this into the RAISE grant to maximize connectivity and funding for the entire community to provide tangible, safe access for all users of all abilities and ages? So the city did apply for a RAISE planning grant this past cycle. It's a different federal funding source for those of you who don't know. And we were looking to connect downtown Kirkwood through pedestrian and bicycle to the southeast quadrant. So it is a parallel, that project we do see as a very important parallel track. What we had discussed about is seeing as them being important pieces that would connect to each other and create the network. But we would be at this point, there could be in the future a time when they become one project, but at this point we're pursuing them because that other RAISE grant is for a planning, to really go through a planning process like this, like we're doing now for the Grants Trail extension, to then get to a point where we have a plan concepts to pursue funding for construction after that. So we are wanting to make sure that we coordinate and capitalize on the synergy through all these projects, similar to the regional connections as well that was mentioned earlier. Paul, anything to add on that?
No, that's really accurate. You know, linkage would be good. So linking any of these this project as in other projects, it kind of builds momentum for each of these projects. So we'll certainly look towards that.
Great. All right, next item, the Union Pacific spur between the two major active railroad lines is currently being used as a maintenance line by Union Pacific. Has anyone been in touch with them regarding the likelihood of them abandoning it and what the time frame might look like? The short answer is yes. So the city has had conversations just generally at a very high level with representatives of the Union Pacific, because we know that this has been a long range goal for a while. And we will continue to have those. We don't have a solid time frame on what it would take to abandon and then to acquire that right away. But those are certainly some of the considerations that, or the conversations that we will have over the next few months, so that we know we can have as good of an idea as possible going into the grant applications, so that if it needs to be phased or an interim path chosen while pursuing that, if the time frame is too long, and that's the path we'll take. Paul, feel free to chime in. I'm just going to keep going through these, but
Okay,
so
that's fine.
The next one, before the 2015 pedestrian bicycle master plan, there was a connection from Grants Trail to the farmers market on streets. This is detailed in the Kirkwood Code of Ordinances, chapter 4.5. This Mark Street Trail also connects with several Kirkwood parks. What's wrong with what we have now? How often is it used? And what does this new plan do that this one doesn't? Yeah, so right, there were a few different identified bicycle routes that predate the 2015 pedestrian bicycle master plan. That's correct. Those were signed. I think they were actually done in conjunction with the effort Paul mentioned previously with the Bike St. Louis, Kirkwood routes, and they may predate that effort as well, but those were the signage I know that pre-existed. And so what the 2015 pedestrian bicycle master plan did was looked at those existing routes, did provide some tweaking to them, but that's the route that Paul mentioned. The one that I'm specifically thinking about, the current trailhead to the farmer's market, is up Holmes and over. It was Scott and now Monroe, I believe, is the way it's signed. So there's, I don't want to say there's something wrong with those alignments, but the goal of this project is to investigate and hopefully construct a connection. Those rely heavily on shared lane markings, on path bicycle, and then for pedestrians, it's the standard, typically 4-foot wide sidewalk wherever available. So the purpose of this project is to make a connection that is more comfortable and safer for users of all ages and abilities, as we said multiple times. So that is the reason why this is being pursued. The city council, gave staff the direction, as Paul mentioned. We started to go down this path of this study earlier this year. The city council approved the funding to do this with the goal and intent to provide a safer and more comfortable connection, or at least pursue funding to do that and come up with a plan so that more users can travel this route. Okay, extending right-of-way is a problem for me as a corner lot property owner. It would take a lot of my property. I fear a trail going right through my front and backyard. Right. Appreciate that comment. We're trying to get the feedback. If you are a property owner that's in the study area and you want to have a one-on-one conversation about your property, we're happy to do that, to set up a time to discuss. And as we go forward with identifying routes, it obviously becomes more pertinent and more relevant because we don't know who in the study area could be affected at this point. But we certainly understand the balance of private property rights and the community desire to get this project through. We completely understand that and appreciate the comment. If our house falls within some of these areas, are we in jeopardy of the city tearing down our house to use for the path? It's a great question. So no, the city is not at this point looking at any options that would purchase whole properties and tear down houses, anything along those lines. So again, we're focused on using existing right-of-way as much as possible, maybe expanding that slightly if needed, using railroad right-of-way if that is an option as well. But we're not looking at purchasing whole properties and tearing down houses. So.
No, we have never. I mean, that's not even a consideration. So.
Is a Grant Trail spur envisioned, or actually adding a new? Is a Grant Trail spur envisioned, or actually adding a new trailhead with parking and facilities? Oh, I see. So, yeah, I think what's been discussed so far in the vision would be extending and having some sort of trailhead at the new northern terminus. Again, it all depends on the alignment and where it ends. It's very likely. I don't say very likely, we're talking about all options. It could work well with the existing farmers market. We understand there's a lot going on there. It's tight, but there's the new performing arts center. So there's different city property or opportunities that we have, but the goal would be to have some sort of trailhead and maybe a hybrid, but we received input about making sure there were some sort of trailhead at the new terminus is what the goal would be. Okay, so how are we doing on time? 6:40, and I've got about 7 more that are submitted right now, which is good. We appreciate all the questions coming in and the participation. So next one is, you think it is safe to have as part of the recommended trail to have bikers bike up and down Holmes Avenue? There are 2 hills between Argonne and Trailhead, over 2 railroad tracks, with 3 islands in the street and bikers slowing up car traffic so then cars speed by. Bikers and walkers need to be reminded, perhaps with signs, that spreading out across the entire lane is dangerous. Right. So the current alignment up Holmes is the current bike route, current identified bike route by the bicycle pedestrian plan, and as somebody mentioned earlier, predated the 2015 pedestrian bicycle plan in the city. So that route, Holmes, does have its challenges for the on-road facilities. One of the goals of this project, or the desires of this project, is to have an alternative, actually change that alignment. We wouldn't be signing and having people go up this route if we can make a safer, more comfortable connection on a different path. So, what % of the city's property tax revenue comes from light industrial properties? I did not expect that question. What % of the city's property tax revenue comes from light industrial property? I will not be able to answer that tonight. We'll certainly have to follow up with that one. And it's also just so, yeah, I mean, the portion of property tax that property owners pay, the vast majority of that does not actually go to the city. So I'll have to look at piecing that out as well. We'll see, you know, of what's being paid, how much goes to the city. And yeah, you know, honestly, I'll have to see. This one could be an interesting one for me to try to trace down, but we'll try to get that answer and follow up with it after the meeting. I have some concerns regarding maintenance repairs to another trail. It would appear that this would fall under the Parks Department, as is the case with Grant's Trailhead. Where is Parks going to get the personnel funds to do this? The Parks Department is already stretched maintaining what they now have. Right, so I don't know what other trail is being, I can't confirm, I don't know what other trail you're discussing or whether it's under the Parks Department for maintenance currently, but the city's park department has been involved and will continue to be involved throughout this process. One of their first comments, and Paul can confirm this, one of their first comments was whatever is done should be as low maintenance as possible, from the plantings to the pavement. We understand that every entity, city of Kirkwood and all of its departments included, we're all stretched for funding. So that is certainly a consideration that we are looking at, making sure that whatever happens, whatever design, it is as cost efficient from a maintenance standpoint as possible. So
there's no maintenance trail out there. So low maintenance and really being respectful to ongoing maintenance and operations is really important. We don't want to create another issue for the city, the Parks Department. So we want to think about those things when we're choosing materials and in the design, to make sure that, you know, we can address some of these things in the design and material selection, so that it minimizes issues that come about with maintaining the trail in the future.
Great. Next question is the Planning and Zoning Commission going to have input in this process? So the Planning and Zoning Commission has had input in the process, as we mentioned, through the long range planning. They are part of those vision processes for the community. They make recommendations and adopt our comprehensive plan, specifically to the design of a trail. They have the opportunity to participate just like other residents. They're residents of the community, so they're able to do that. We were given direction by the elected officials, the city council, to pursue this project specifically, to come up with an alignment through a public process doing this study. So that's what we are doing. I am the liaison to the Planning and Zoning Commission, so they all know how to get a hold of me personally, and I'm more than happy to have those discussions with anyone on the commission. But this process We've already been given the direction from the council to do it, so we are doing it. And once the public planning process is complete, there will be a preferred alignment, and that is what we will pursue unless the council tells us to stop. So our public restrooms, drinking fountains, and picnic shelters to, that's all I'm seeing, but I'm gonna say, my guess is yes, the amenities like public restrooms, drinking fountains, shelters, benches. If the question is, are those being incorporated into the design? Yes, we're looking at opportunities. And I think it was on one of Paul's slides, but using connections to existing community assets like Fillmore Park, if there's able to be a connection to that, that's another opportunity to tap into the resources there. But yes, so those are the types of things that we're looking at to make sure that the users of the trail have a good experience when they're on it. So, all right.
And I took note of this too, Jonathan. I know exactly what he's talking about with his comment here. So
this next one,
yeah, duly noted as far as that connection.
Okay, regarding Leffingwell and Elliott and Scott.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I know exactly what he's talking about, and I have that noted.
Okay, great, thank you. Appreciate that feedback and clarification. All right, next question. Are there any plans to bring via Metro STL to the trailhead or to build a bus route to the trailhead so a cyclist has a way to get his or her bike to a bike shop in case there is trouble? I'm not, Paul, are you familiar with via Metro STL? I don't know if they mean like Metro bus.
It could be more of a call ride service or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with via Metro service either, unfortunately.
Okay. So we might need some more clarification on that. I apologize. So at this point, to build a bus,
we would include bike amenities like a fix-it station or a pump at along the way at select locations. And there is a bike shop down on the over at the I believe it's by the Oakland trailhead. Be nice to have that a full service bike shop. That would be really handy. But that's also an opportunity, an entrepreneurial opportunity along the trail.
We do have one downtown Kirkwood, so if they're on this 1 mile stretch of it, they would be within walking distance certainly of the downtown Kirkwood shop. But anyway, if there's clarification on that, please provide it. But hopefully that got to some sort of an answer for you. All right, the next one, are we looking to have Metro increase bus service to connect with the extension? I think it would be a good move. So I can't say that that's been the specific discussion. Obviously, Metro is going through their whole, or they went through their whole Reimagine Metro over the past couple of years, where it's reallocated their resources, eliminated some routes, changed some routes. So I guess I don't have a good answer to that, except that we appreciate you bringing up the point and seeing making sure we identify the Metro routes and how this facility will cross and interact with that network.
My only addition to that, Jonathan, is yeah, we look for as many partners as possible, and we will definitely communicate with Metro to see how we can tie their network together with this connection to get that partner on board as a support, as in support. So we will communicate with them. And that's when I mentioned about funding application. When you have a lot of public agency partners like a Metro and a Great Rivers Greenway and the city of Kirkwood and a DOT of some type, the more of those kind of partners that provide a support letter and know what we're doing and how they can connect to that, the better that funding application becomes and the more fundable it is for the project. So that's definitely in our thought process.
we had a couple people chime in too, I hope so, about the bicycle shops. So there is Bicycles of Kirkwood on Kirkwood Road, one person said, and that's the one I was thinking of. I appreciate you mentioning that. And another person said we have Alpine Shop also in downtown Kirkwood, in addition to the bike shop. And then the library does have, that's correct, the library does have a bicycle repair station currently there that is similar to what Paul was mentioning, that we would look at other key locations to put those in. So thank you for those points. Okay, and I was told the property tax question they can find out on their own. If you do need help on that, let me know. I'm happy to look into it. Let's see, the last question we have, and we're aren't there 20-year-old trees and no tracks right where tracks used to be on the spur east of the Scott Railroad crossing? Railroad can't claim they use that portion. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, there. That's a great point. We're having that discussion with the railroad. Again, they have their own opinion on what they can claim to be active and when it's used, and to what extent, even if a small portion of it's used, how far that active status is extended on that. But we have raised that point, and I think we will continue to do so, about the fact when it's completely overgrown, how active is it really? But we do know right around Leffingwell, it is used for maintenance on either side of it from time to time. So it is there is some use on the spur in that specific area.
But with the comments that we have tonight, and with the comments that we've been seeing on the web tool, it's clearly an alignment that people see as an opportunity. So I think the faster we can get something developed and an alignment developed and on paper that we can take and we'll talk to the railroad with, it's the better it is going to be to get, talk through that to see what opportunities are out there for making that connection. So
great. And it looks like I got some help from one of my colleagues that said Via Metro STL is a shared ride service, provides basically ride share opportunities. So yeah, I don't know that we've talked about the integration of ride share services necessarily, but I think it's something we can look into or consider at how we might make sure we're allowing those access if needed for emergency or repair or anything like that, or multimodal for that matter. So we appreciate the clarification and point. So we're coming up a little before 7 o'clock, and those are all the questions that we received in the question and answer box. So I think we did have a couple slides to follow up with. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Beth is going to talk about just reinforce how you can communicate with us and provide input.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So again, we have a mapping tool where you can provide location-specific comments, and I'll be sending you a link to that. We have a survey, and the survey really focuses on the amenities that you would like to see on the trail. So the comments that came up in the questions about bathrooms and benches and other things that you'd like to see along the trail, you can provide that input on the survey. And then you've done a great job working with the Q&A tonight. And we have Jonathan's contact information, which I'll also send to you. So within an hour or so following the meeting, you'll get an email from me. My name is Beth Quindry. So you know to keep an eye out for that, and we'll have links to all of these opportunities.
Great. Yep. So on behalf of the city and the project team, I just want to thank you all again. I think I saw at the maximum we had 57 attendees in addition to our panelists up here. So, and I wasn't looking at it all the time. So we appreciate everybody's attendance and help us spread the word to those that you talk about, your neighbors, and let them know we're looking for input as much as possible. We look forward to hearing from you all in the future, and look for the follow-up to come.
And again, Kirkwood's not disappointed with their participation like this. It's expected, and you delivered. So thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to talking with you. Make sure you contact us if you want to talk to us. We have office hours, and you can arrange any meeting. So we're open to talk to you. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.